Coming up next, I am going to be speaking to a former Labour cabinet minister about the battleground for Britain. But we also want to hear from you on 0344 499 1000. And what we want to hear from you about today is, after reports that 90% of young people, if Britain introduced conscription, would not fight for our country and our way of life, we want to hear, is it time to reintroduce national service? And also, maybe you have a viewpoint on the death penalty that we've also been talking about today. You can get in touch by calling, texting or tweeting me. Joining me now is Michael Jacobs, who is not a former Labour cabinet minister, but is a former advisor to Gordon Brown. Michael, welcome to the show. Thank you very much. I gave you a bit of a promotion there. I hope you will take it. Look, really interesting story in The Independent today about a trap, an alleged trap that may be sprung on Keir Starmer if, as all polls point to, he wins the next general election. If, using the £14 billion headroom that's been identified this week, Jeremy Hunt chooses to slash taxes, Keir Starmer may be put in a position where he ultimately has to come in and increase taxes, and has described the Conservative government, my government, as salting the ground before his administration. Do you recognise that description of salting the ground?
I'm not exactly sure what salting the ground means. I'm not sure voters will either. The situation, however, is not of the Labour Party's making. What the Chancellor looks as if almost certainly he's going to do, and as he says, he's your Chancellor, is to cut some taxes. I don't think he's going to slash them, but he's going to cut income tax, one would imagine, possibly national insurance, in the March budget. And he's claiming, and the media are claiming, that the reason he can do that, despite the dire straits that our public services are in, is because of this so-called concept of fiscal headroom, which is the amount that he's apparently got to spend, he has available to spend within his fiscal rules. But it's all a nonsense, because the fiscal rule that is being applied here is about what will be happening to debt in 5 years' time. And of course, nobody knows what will be happening to debt in 5 years' time. So this is all projections into the future. And they're projections based on nonsense spending plans. So in order to be able to create some fiscal room to cut taxes in a couple of months' time, the Chancellor has to assume in his spending plans that he's going to slash public spending. I mean, really slash it. Austerity on steroids, austerity Mark II, in the period after the general election. He's also assumed that he's going to cut, he's going to raise fuel duty, which hasn't been raised for nearly 15 years. These are all nonsense assumptions. They're not going to happen, but that's what enables him, apparently, to be able to cut taxes.
But Michael,
now,
just
if he
on
does
the...
that, if he does that, that's of the government's making, and frankly, it's irrelevant what the Labour Party thinks at this point while they're not in government.
Well, Michael, it's not quite irrelevant, is it? Because just on these fiscal rules that you describe as nonsense, they are the same fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves has said she will abide by if she's Chancellor of the Exchequer after the next general election. So if they're nonsense for Jeremy Hunt, is Rachel Reeves talking nonsense as well?
Rachel Reeves is doing what any shadow Chancellor has to do, which is to cut off the arguments that will be made by Conservatives, which they're already making about Labour's green spending plans, to cut off any way of those being treated as reasons why you shouldn't vote Labour. So what oppositions do at this point is
she's conning the electorate, then, is she, Michael?
No, let me finish. What they don't do is they don't give easy targets for their opponents. So it's clear what Rachel Reeves is doing. What Labour would do in government will depend on the economic circumstance at the time. And obviously, if you're looking 5 years ahead to where debt will be, that's all about growth. So the real question that faces the country is the Conservative method of trying to get back growth in the economy, or the Labour method, Conservatives relying on tax cuts going largely to the better off, or a Labour method which is a bit more borrowing and a bit more public spending? Which one of those is more likely to get you growth? And almost every economist will tell you it's investment that gets you growth. It isn't tax cuts, because a lot of tax cuts are saved and so on. So there's a proper economic question here,
Michael,
which is
you're right.
Which government
we can
is
get
more
into
likely
that
to generate the growth?
Let me just drag you back to what you started off by saying. It rather sounded to me like you were implying that Rachel Reeves, heaven forfend, is saying one thing to the electorate while at the same time going to do the exact opposite. So you said that she's just cutting off arguments by saying she's going to stick to the fiscal rules. Do you think, in fact, when Labour Party come into government, they will stick to the fiscal rules, yes or no? I mean, Rachel Reeves has said...
Yes, they will absolutely stick to the fiscal rules.
Stick
I've
to the
absolutely
rules.
no doubt
Let
about
me
that.
ask you. Let me ask you in relation to those rules. Then let me ask you in relation to those rules. It's very good of you to clarify that Rachel Reeves means what she says. I'm sure she does as well. About this £28 billion that the Labour Party is committed to decarbonise the grid by the end of the next Parliament. If she sticks within those fiscal rules, that equates to a 4% increase in the basic rate of tax. In terms of raising £28 billion a year.
That would be 28 billion if you all took it as tax. It's going to be borrowed for. It's capital spending, the golden rule, which of course it's going to be borrowed for, because that's what you do when you want to invest. It's what businesses do. Every business knows that if you want to grow, if you want to improve your productivity, you need to invest. You need to invest in the new kit, the new training of your staff that enables you to become more productive. That's a fundamental...
Didn't go that...
No, let me finish. That's what businesses do, and that's what governments have to do as well. So we need to modernise our energy system. We're still using a lot of fossil fuels. That's what's given us these ridiculous energy prices over the last few years, because we're so dependent on fossil fuels. So what the Labour Party wants to do, technically the government ought to be wanting to do it as well, because they say they're also committed to acting on climate change, is to turn our power system more renewable. That requires investment. So what do? You borrow for that investment, and that's what gives you the productivity.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm not surprised, as former advisor to Gordon Brown, that you are so heavily wedded to borrowing, and I guess that's what the next Labour government will be doing as well. Thank you very much for joining us here on TalkTV. Now, I think Michael can go. Thank you.